India has already demonstrated its potentials in engineering goods to the world. Now, the time has come to leverage its expertise in the engineering services. According to the Ministry of Commerce and Industries, Government of India, construction service exports from India have risen up from $1 billion in 2012 to $2.256 billion in 2018. NASSCOM says that the revenues of major Indian IT companies from engineering consultancies have grown much faster as compared to traditional software service businesses. India has high potential in niche segments with engineering and construction services such as software services in consumer and automobile industries, engineering design, ER&D services which have a considerable market. The time has come for India to leverage the whole theme of digital engineering and construction services. This session will discuss the following. What are the niche areas of engineering and construction services and what is their export potential? How has India been performing in engineering and construction consultancies, digitalization, emerging technologies, innovation in India? Does India have domain expertise, skill sets and training facilities for engineering and construction professionals? What are the initiatives taken by the government to promote skilling and training of engineering and construction professionals? Sir, I request you to please continue with the discussion. Thank you, sir.
Hello. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. We would have liked Mr. Jain to be here because the points that we are raising is something that we would have liked him to respond. Unfortunately, he's not here, but I'll request you to take the notes well, and you will see that before it goes to the ministry. So as was discussed, as was briefly introduced, the Ministry of Commerce says that the services exports from engineering and construction has grown from $1 billion to about 2.25 billion in the last 5 years, between 12 and 18. If you look at the gross world product, it is about $88 trillion. And if you assume 10% of that is related to construction, then it's about $8 trillion. And from a services point of view, if it is 2%, then we are talking of a market of 160 billion. And as per PwC, the GWP will grow to such an extent by 2030, it is going to almost double. So the construction market size would be about $15.5 trillion by 2030. And so you will see that the services scope in this is also going to see a growth of that order, basically driven by US, China and India. So we are at 2.25 billion and the market size is 160, and so you will see that maybe we are at around 1.4% of what is the available market. There is Engineering News Record which lists out the companies, the top 100 companies, if you see, either in construction or design engineering firms. There is only one design firm in the top 100. And most of the firms are from China, US and Europe. So there is a lot of scope in this market, and we hope we will be able to talk a little bit about the opportunities and where we can grow, where we can contribute and also some of the challenges that we as consulting professionals have. So at the outset, if you look at the stakeholders in this, from a design and engineering perspective, we have traditional Indian engineering companies like TCE, Stoop, and DCPL, WAPCOS, and so on. And that is one part. And in a way, the three of us represent that. Mr. Samuel is from Stoop, and Mr. Ghoshal is the president of Consulting Engineers Association of India. And we have Bharat Gala, who is the MD of Atkins, and there are a lot of MNCs who have set shop in India, like Jacobs, SNC Lavalin, Atkins, ACOM. You can go on naming them. And we will see what they can do to contribute to this growth in this session as well. Then we have engineering R&D companies like L&T Technology Services, CN, Quest, and the technology giant General Electric. And we have Alok Nanda, who is the MD of John F. Wills Technology Center and CTO for GE South Asia with us. We will listen to him on how the Indian innovation ecosystem has grown and how it will take us forward. There are several startups in this Internet of Things and industrial Internet of Things space, which is bringing disruption in the way the services are offered, the engineering services. And Knowledge Quest is one such company, and we have Mr. Ganesh Iyer, the CTO, to talk about the contribution of that. And another key stakeholder that is missing is, again, when you look at the top 100 construction companies, there are only two of them, again, L&T ECC and SPCL. And the markets, that 1.4% of the overseas market that I spoke about, the contribution is mainly from the Middle East, and rest of the markets we are not there at all from a construction perspective. We would have liked, we had confirmation also, but unfortunately both of them are not here today. And then to represent various engineering consultants, we have what is called as the Consulting Engineers Association of India, which is the governing body of all the consulting engineers. And they are the official mouthpiece for FIDIC in India. And we have Mr. Ghoshal, who is the president of the Consulting Engineers Association of India. So let's get started with the engineering and design. And as I was mentioning you earlier, in this $160 billion market opportunity, right, and only one Indian company figuring in the top 100 design firms, US and China together have about 36%, European companies have 36%, Australian companies 5%, Canada 4%, South Korea 4%. So 85% of the international market, and international market is that which is excluding the domestic market of the revenue of the respective companies which are listed in the top 100 companies, right? So to tell us more on the current performance in engineering and construction services, so DEPCM, Design Engineering and Project Management, or Program Management as we can call it, the key market segments and the new areas in this domain and the growth potential, I will request Mr. Samuel to provide us his views.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Rajashekhar, for this opportunity. I represent STOOP. STOOP stands for Specialist in Technique and Utilization of Precast Concrete. So we have been in India from '63, and little thereafter we started also doing work in the foreign countries, started with Middle East countries. So we were exporting specialist services like processing, long span bridges, etc., which we continue to do. And we are not alone, but there are other major players like Tata Consulting Engineers, Wapcos, ICT, RV, and so many other people are already in the market. And as I said before, so we have been working in the areas of airports, bridges, roads, sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants, and buildings, etc. And the early part of our service, what we found, the international market, the facilities available were much different from what we had in India. Therefore, it gave us a lot of chance to experiment or use new technologies. For example, we started using 2.5 meter dia piles many years ago outside, and it has not yet come into India, maybe just coming in. Life is becoming a little more difficult these days. It is not as easy as before. But we continue to look for opportunities in Africa, Middle East, and there's Bangladesh, and some of Sri Lanka and other countries. There are opportunities, but the type of service needs to be more and more specialist. You know, the regular services are no longer possible to, that window is getting reduced. Because all countries, wherever we have been exporting services, they want to promote their own people. And so at the moment, we are doing some railway projects in Africa, some bridges in Bangladesh. So we have an establishment in the Middle East. So we have rendering services.
Generally have thought of digital as an IT installation, right? So you take a software and you say, let's say for example BIM, and I have installed it in one site or two sites or one division or two division or across the board, and then you kind of then send out a mandate saying all my workforce now needs to start using it. Well, they say, okay, let me start using it, and then after 3, 4, 6 months, all the fancy things that the consultants promised never happened. And people get frustrated and they go back saying this initiative has failed, and then they roll it back and go back to their old ways of working. The reason why we feel this has happened is this mindset that it is just an IT installation, right? So, and as Mr. Samuel rightly pointed out, the fundamental thing that we are seeing in the construction space is, how do we first become effective and deliver stuff faster, cheaper, right? So in that aspect, the first thing that comes out is, how do we make operations effective? How do we make our planning effective? Even things like design, right? So for example, somebody did a design for a large, and we work with one of the persons that are not here, L&T in that matter. Some designs that they put together for large, water construction projects. And they had a very simple problem. There are these huge RFPs that are coming out, and in the construction industry, no two proposals are the same. So they wanted a way to get to the specs and give something similar in terms of the capacity, in terms of the specifications and so on. Yeah, again, just wait. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, hello sir. So it could be as simple as, how do I find, all this design that's, buried in, drawings and design. So they know that the information is there, but how do I get that faster? And how do I make a specification or an engineering design that's similar to what was given so that my cost is better, I know that it'll work. That's the first important thing. They need to give a spec that, works for the bespoke requirement that's come from the client, right? So what this has led to is, all this siloed information that is available in the construction companies. There is now a large need to take all that information together and start aggregating it, right? So, and this aggregation is first for internal purposes, for any kind of service that you want to provide. So you want to be smarter, you want to be more cheaper, and you want to, your design should look better and so on. And then after you have reached that level of maturity, take that as an offering and then start giving it to clients across the world, right? So that's the trend that we are seeing. And in that, I'll talk about specific, 3-4 technology areas which look very promising, right? The first thing is obviously this whole BIM and integration of the data. So you can call it as a data warehouse or a data lake. So there are a lot of technologies that are there on the big data, cloud adoption, and so on, where traditionally construction services are very localized, decentralized. So a unit in the south of India has its own set of practices versus the north, or between countries it completely changes. So how do I take the best practices from my design, my engineering, the way that I am executing my project management, bring it all together, and then have it accessible for the entire organization to use, right? So that's the first step that we see as a service that most of the construction firms are taking, saying how do I take all this data, and the data here is very diverse. A lot of it is spreadsheets, which has a lot of specifications, a lot of it is models, and then there is this BIM systems that are being put in place. How do I kind of integrate all that and give us a view so that for designs that we are putting together for new projects, for proposals that are coming through, and even for our own execution, this becomes much better and much faster, right? And there are challenges like, a design that's put out and it's outsourced to a vendor. That vendor, when he tries to, implement it on the site, they, come up with differences, then it comes all the way back. There is a lot of cycle time that's going through because of the lack of, integration of the data. So first point, that's a huge service offering from, emerging companies like us, is this whole data integration play. Now the second thing, he pointed out is, the customization, especially for construction, for retail customers. How do you personalize the whole experience to them? So that could be in terms of mobile applications, in terms of AR, VR, so that you kind of show, instead of just being models or charts that used to go out earlier, it's more of a real experience that they start getting from that space. But the third and the most important thing that we see from a service point is this whole aspect of analytics, and as we extend it further, advanced techniques like machine learning and so on. What we have seen inevitably is in all these large construction projects, you have heavy equipment, costly equipment that's being used. Examples could be excavators that you're using, or lifts and cranes that you're using. And so there's this whole supply chain of, you place a order to a vendor, they supply it something. By the time your project is not ready, so that equipment is waiting there. So there's a lot of cost that is getting spent, and for a lot of cases, it's not getting tracked. And the impact on the cost, top line, bottom line, is not even getting measured. So now we see a lot of clients coming to us and saying, how do you now take the concept of something like sensors, or these equipments that are already available, have the capability to transmit data on whether activity is happening or not, what's the peak time of activity, what's the amount of workload that's going on, and so on. How can we take that and do optimization of the end-to-end thing? It could be in terms of the equipment usage that is there, the planning of equipment that is there, and thereby using it for scheduling the overall project itself. That's where industrial IoT plays a huge role. So we have had experiences working with companies where we can integrate with these large equipments. They give data locally. So let's say you have a huge site where excavation is going on. That equipment can send data locally, and then we can collect the data, see what's the pattern for usage of equipment, how do you use it in the right way, how do you plan your equipment usage, and so on. Immediately brings down your cost and makes it cheaper and the solution better. And the second thing is in terms of safety. Safety becomes a huge thing. construction activity, safety, industrial safety. That's another, like a compliance thing that's come into place, right? Especially in industrial construction, we see now there is a mandate that people are wearing protective PPEs, but they want ways to kind of enforce the compliance. That's where we have done pilots with video analytics using machine learning, where you can put cameras that automatically monitor people that are going in and out of a place. We have RFIDs that are attached to the jackets and equipment that people are wearing. So the whole point for the supervisors there is to say, I want to know the list of people that the construction workers or the contract workers that are coming in that are not following these practices, and all I want to do is to take them to a training session if they're not doing it, because I cannot risk safety issues in my workplace, right? So they want, especially in the Indian market, they want very cost-effective ways through cameras, through servers, through software, through sensors, where this experience can be given to them. And I see that for consulting companies, this can be an offering that can then be taken and exported across the globe, right? Because this is like a common problem statement. So what then we are coming to is, there are a standard set of what we call as use cases, which will solve specific pain points for the construction industry. And as companies start to realize and implement that, be it for the Indian market or for across the globe, we see that as an offering that can then be exported for many kinds of use cases, right? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ganesh. And continuing this discussion on technologies, in the ER&D space, by 2020 itself, the market size is being talked about as about $150 billion. The IoT, AI, additive manufacturing, robotics, they are seeing a growth at a CAGR of excess of 40 to 60%, right? And NASSCOM says that the Indian software companies are actually making more money from engineering than software services. So Alok, GE is in products, is also on an extended scope an EPC, and it is a captive of a global MNC as well from an Indian perspective. And you are the center, your center here in Bangalore is the R&D hub for GE. So what are the emerging technologies in this space that you are working on, and how has the innovation ecosystem developed in India, and what else needs to be done, and how will it help us to grow to $5 trillion economy that we are aspiring for? Your views.
Sure, thanks Raj, and thanks to this conference for bringing us all together on this stage. From GE perspective, so GE legacy is the Thomas Edison legacy, that I find out what the world needs and then I go ahead and invent it. And that's what we've been doing. Our center in Bangalore has about 5,000 engineers in different sectors. And over the years, we've contributed almost about 4,000 patents from here for local, regional solutions, and also for solutions all over the world. So that's something that, I mean, at least me as an Indian and as a GE employee, very, very proud of having done it all through Indian talent, because everybody in our center is actually an Indian who studied, most of them studied in India and have been contributing to the growth of science and to the growth of GE all around the world. So there's nothing actually missing in our ecosystem. But I'll tell you what is happening today, which we need to be very, very aware of, because the world that we are getting into or are already into is not the same as what we did in last 19 years of our presence in this center in India. The first thing that is happening, which we see but don't really realize it, is that the cost of computation is reducing dramatically. Okay, now according to it's been growing according to Moore's law, but if you think about it, in 2025, all estimates say that in $1,000 you can buy enough computation that is equal to one human brain. What one human brain can do. By 2050, you can buy in $1,000 as much computation as all human brains can do. Okay? You would be able to, we will be able to buy that. Now that makes all these technologies that Ganesh was talking about almost inevitable. It's not about, okay, should we do it, should we not do it? Robotics is not new. I think when Raj and I were in college, many of our colleagues were doing robotics research. Okay, it's not new. I mean, statistics is not new. Artificial intelligence is not new. What is new is that you can do all those calculations much faster now and much cheaper, and hence you can deploy them for everything. And that will completely change our world, because now all of us have grown in an environment where all these constraints made us better engineers. That we would go for a solution in a way which required engineering judgment and solution. Now you can, we would choose a portion of design space to evaluate rather than evaluating the whole design space, and we used to take a lot of pride in that. Now ask an engineer today, I mean, they can evaluate the whole design space. So what would be needed for the engineer to be called successful is very different than where we grew up with. So that's a very dramatic change. And so all these emerging technologies that we talked about are coming in because the physical and digital boundaries have blurred to an extent that there is nothing at all. Okay, the industrial world has almost merged with the digital world. So that's one thing that is happening. The second thing that is happening, you see all around the world, we talk about disruptions. All of us have seen disruptions, been part of disruptions. You think about how many of you own Nokia as your first phone, and how many of you own Nokia today. I mean, nothing wrong with Nokia, but the fact is they got disrupted. Anybody could have been, okay? Now, the rate at which disruptions happen today have also become much faster because of all these technologies now enabling that. But what is happening in the world is, because the rate of disruption is so fast and it is so difficult to invest in, say, future, many of the companies that I see around are hesitating to do that. It's the same situation in Western Europe, it's the same situation in US, but with a very big difference. In US and in Western Europe, a lot of that far-end research is sponsored by government, and government does it through industry. Somehow in India, an industry is considered as a not so trustworthy, and you want to do research only in academic institutions. And even if you partner, like we partner a lot with academic institutions in India, I'm very proud of that because of the quality of people that we meet and who work in that. But the fact is, a government institution or a academic institution is not catered for doing program management. And hence, all the money going to academic institutions gets us something, but not at the speed, at the pace, and at the quality of which the industry really wants. All around the world, governments encourage private industry to do far-reaching research by partnering with them. In India also, government is doing it a lot more now with schemes like UAY and Imprint and all. But the lead of that is an academic institution, which I think is a huge problem. We need to flip that. We must engage academic institutions, but industries need to lead that. Okay, and that's something that if that doesn't happen, we will always be working on commodity stuff, and then we will worry about our bottom line. Top line will keep growing, bottom line will not exist. And industry will always be worried about, okay, will somebody in Bangladesh come and disrupt me? Will somebody in Vietnam come and disrupt me? We should compete with Western Europe and US. We should stop competing with like people who are like around us and who we think are not as good as or as developed as us. So those are some of the things, Raj, that I feel really strongly worried about. Because if we don't change that, even GE, I mean, what benefit does GE have to do research in India if the same research they can do in Europe with European government money? Why should they do it? Okay, and if they ask me as a GE employee or a GE leader, I would encourage them to do that if they're getting money somewhere. Research will go where money goes. And nobody in the world has an appetite to fund far-reaching research than a government. So if government does not support, like it's done in Europe or in US, then we will always be people who will be begging for transfer of technology, not doing transfer of technology to everybody, which we should do. How many of our institutions, how many IITs are in top 100 educational institutions in the world? Do you know that? Zero. IIT students are leading world technology companies today. IITs don't come in top 100. We are happy with that. How can we be happy with that? So anyway, I'll keep talking. I mean, this is a passionate topic for me, Raj. But I hope you get the drift of where I'm going. We'll need to do it differently because the world is changing, and we can't do it till we get the governments to come in.
Yeah, very forcefully put, Alok, and he's brought the focus on some of the challenges of the industry. And we have this great engineering talent in India, but somehow we still are depending on, let's say, an EV or a Hyperloop. We want to get somebody else to do that. Is that more challenging than what ISRO does? Right? So why can't we do all these things ourselves, right? And then another aspect that Ganesh talked about is on how this digital will help in project governance. You're talking of a command and control center. We worked with a customer in the Middle East who was controlling 27 assets, power plants, in Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa, right? So the challenges that we have in governance is very easy if we have this kind of a concept, even in our government projects where we have 100 smart cities. We ourselves are working in 15 MSMEs and 5 states on Namami Gange and so on and so forth. There are challenges there, but the digital can definitely enhance the governance. The biggest asset, Mr. Ghoshal, is the people, right? And the competencies, the skills that the industry demands today. Do we have it? And what are the challenges that the industry is facing, and how are we, the industry is responding or the government is responding to it? And Mr. Ghoshal, as I was mentioning, is the president of Consulting Engineers Association of India. And so from a consultant's perspective, I would now request you to highlight some of the aspects of this growth as well as the challenges that we are having.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. You see, the consultancy industry, so as we say today, as a consultancy industry, it has grown after, we came out of the control of colonialists, because it is colonialism which has stunted growth of infrastructure and growth of knowledge in the country. And it took quite some time for us to come out of that shadow. You see, we have been exporting consultancy in a meager way for quite some time. And even in that stage, why we were relevant? Because we were able to give appropriate technology to the developing world. What we have learned by ourselves, by working in a situation where we were tremendously handicapped and still found out solutions, as the Indians would like to say, we made jogars, we made our own solutions. And that's what took us to other developing countries in the Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Africa, as we are getting today. But the paradigm shift is there. We are changing. And as has been pointed out, we have got to attune ourselves to that changing climate. It is no more just offering appropriate technology and at a cheaper price where you can use the local material. You know, because, and the importance of consultancy sector is not in the growth of consultancy alone. Mind you, the moment you take consultancy, you carry with it the construction industry and the suppliers. Wherever Indian consultants have gone in the Middle East, in the Southeast Asia, in Africa, it has carried behind it the construction industry simultaneously and also Indian supplies. And that is very important for the service sector. I mean, construction is also a service sector, but it should not be seen different from the consultancy because they move together and come along with that comes the supplies. Why have Europe and Asia flourished in supply and the industry? Industry has grown because the knowledge partners have gone first and they have brought in, they have recommended materials which are being manufactured in their own country. And that time has come and our focus should be there. And that is where we look forward to the Service Export Promotion Council to take note that consultancy is not a separate thing. It is part of exporting the Indian industry and the Indian construction industry as well. And that's why consultancy requires special support today. The other important thing which has been pointed out by the previous speakers is the digital revolution and what it is changing, our perspective, our whole approach. You know, even today we have not fully attuned to it. Even today you don't see drones being used for survey in difficult territory. You see drones used in marriage halls for taking photographs. When you see, you know, we are supposed to move to FASTag in the tollways from 1st of December and today is 27th. And we find only one lane for FASTag and the balance of the lane still for, you know, paid. And in the FASTag the sensors are not working. Now these are the aberrations which will go over. But more than that, it is a mindset. It is our own understanding what we are capable of. After all, if you see the world, maybe every sixth person is an Indian. But more importantly, every third or fourth person of working age is an Indian. It is not only the question of the number of people, but it is a question of number of working people. Europe is an old country, Japan is an old country. Same is happening to USA gradually. And in these circumstances, there is no other way than Indian working age people taking over these services. And whatever these predictions of 2030 or 2035 looks to us to be impossible and imaginary, today we understand that it is not imagination because the conversion will take up very soon. Now, where do we really look forward to the government for support? As has been explained, you know, it is the research which industry can lead along with the support of the academics, because academics are completely inured from the realities of the ground, which industry has. Industry can provide the teeth to a research. And academic research does not always move to immediate application. It is not the application of technology. It is the knowledge which they have. And they should play the support role to the industry. And that is where a mindset, a change of mindset is necessary. Each of us who are in the consulting industry find that it has become compulsory for any design to be proof checked by an academic. And each of us know at the bottom of our heart that the same institutions where we have been trained, when we go to them for getting a design check, we understand the gap in practical knowledge which is there in the academics, which we have to certainly use the knowledge, but we should use with the modification of the practicality which only the industry, the consultancy industry, and even the manufacturing industry can explain. You see, the biggest gap in Indian knowledge industry is lack of data. You know, when I was trying to put down what are the sectors where Indian consultants have already done work abroad, I was surprised to find that there are fields which Indians have worked, which even though I have been 60 years in the consultancy industry, I have not known about. But because we don't have any record, we don't have any data, even within a firm, the data is not there of what all they have done in the past. We have not been accustomed to store data. Today, the opportunity which has been given, which has been given by the data analytic situation has to be utilized. And that is where certainly an organization like SEPC can come forward to help, to record all the data, store all the data, and make it available. We do not know what we have done. And that's the most important thing we have to look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ghoshal. And we talked about the skills and competencies part. You know, there are a lot of efforts that the government is currently taking, and ACBC has been playing a major role in this promoting this export of our engineering services. In fact, for the FIDIC ASPAC conference, they supported us, and we also had a buyer-seller meet there as well, right? Then from a skills perspective, you know, we have Skill India, NSDA, NSDC, Ministry of for Skill Development, and so on. So we are very fortunate to have Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey with us, you know, Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industries, to talk about some of the initiatives that the government is taking to promote skilling and training engineering and construction professionals. Sir, along with that, some of the key points that were discussed and which you might want to respond is on the, you know, the localization requirements that most of the countries are having currently, and how the government can help us in working with the embassies. In working with the embassies, the Chinese design institutes, and wherever projects are funded by, whether it's Europe or China or Japan, there is this requirement of using consultants from their countries, and whereas our Exim Bank projects normally do not have that. And then another very important point talked about was that most of the funding that the industries get have a requirement of an academia being a part of that. And when will we think of having you know, industry have the major role in the sponsored research, which can help us actually in producing technologies for future. And these are some of the two key points that we would want you to also respond, along with the other initiatives that the government is bringing.
Good afternoon to you, everyone. First of all, my apologies. I was a little late due to a previous session got extended. It's a very, very important session as I see, and I think government attaches a lot of importance to this sector per se. And there are a couple of areas where we would like industries help also, because there is a lot of communication gap between the industry and the government in several areas. First of all, if you know that the construction, real estate, infrastructure all put together as one category encompassing the construction sector, they were contributing to almost 9.2% of the India's GDP at one stage. That was about 2013-14. And today, the contribution of the sector is down to about 6%. So So you can imagine what kind of job losses, what kind of impact on the growth it has led to. There are several areas out of which I would focus on 3-4 areas which we feel are very, very important. Number one, if you read the World Bank report, which did the productor factor analysis, then they found the productivity of the construction sector in India has grown slowest in the economy. Now, this should be a cause of concern. In fact, there the total factor productivity analysis showed that the growth of the productivity in even governmental services has been higher than in the construction sector. Now this should be a serious cause of worry. And the answer is that the infusion of technology in this sector for a variety of reasons, social, economic, I'm not going to touch on to that, that's the responsibility of the industry, that did not happen. And the consequences are for all of us to see. And therefore, reform and infusion of technology is something which cannot wait. If we make these two things to wait, then we will be chasing rest of the world and we will be lagging behind. And this is what precisely is happening. Coming on to what needs to be done. The processes, the issue of consultancy came, and consultancy we attach huge importance to. But then, and we even are providing under the SEIS scheme incentive and support to consultancy for foreign projects where you do the foreign exchange earning. But we as a Ministry of Commerce, we are also under pressure from another department in the government that this is being misused. This is not being fairly accounted for. And that is putting a lot of pressure on even SEPC, and they are being made accountable, and the pressure is that there is no need to provide support for the consultancy services. Now this is another department of the government speaking, because they feel that the data that has been supplied to them is not above board. We need to sit and we need to sort out these issues, because we feel that, as Mr. Ghoshal said, consultancy services alone are not that important, but if taken in the context of what they do for the project export, what they do for the engineering export, and what kind of soft power they generate around various parts of the world, then the consultancy export becomes very, very important. And also consultancy exports give you an opportunity to move up the value chain. You do certain things which are today low value, and you do it at lower cost, that is why it is coming to you. But then for you it is an opportunity to go up the ladder using this work today, and tomorrow somebody else will do this work for you, whereas you will move up in the value chain. Now this is what is the cycle of the consultancy professionals. So first point that I was mentioning relates to reform. Under the champion services sector, we have attached a lot of importance to reforms in this sector. And when we talk of reforms, then they will have to start in the complete gamut of the professional services, because when you are doing a project, then you need engineers, you need architects, you need accountants, you need legal professionals, you need everybody. And all these people, they come together in successful execution of a particular project. We were talking in another session yesterday, and we were talking of the legal services, the IPR. Now on designs, Word generates so many IPRs. Now architectural services, I am sure here you have most of the engineers present, not the architects. But the fight between the architects and the engineers is a never-ending fight. It goes on. Whereas word over, their roles are very clearly defined, and architects have a legally defined role and engineers have a legally defined role. But here, there is complete overlap and a virtual rivalry. As a result of which, sorry for saying so, the unplanned, unaesthetic structures, construction that you see around, it's result of that. But you as professionals have to fix it. Government did make a very serious effort. It moved away the architectural, the law from the MHRD, it brought to UD, but that decision also remains not fully implemented, because there is still fight between the engineers and architects going on. But we have to fix it. And this is not something which is very novel or creative or innovative. Word over, in all developed countries, these are very settled roles. And we have to settle in India also. If we were to do big, beautiful projects where we can then offer consultancy to the rest of the world. So reform is one area, and we are looking for reforms in engineering services, we are looking for reforms in architectural services, we are looking for reforms in chartered accountancy services, and we are looking for reforms in the legal services. And Justice Pratibha Singh yesterday talked about the Legal Services Act 2006, Britain, on which Commerce Ministry did a lot of work, and all other three that I mentioned, Commerce Ministry has done whole lot of detailed analysis what kind of reforms are needed, and we have interacted with the concerned ministries. But as professionals, unless you rise above the role of as individual and companies and start driving this agenda, these reforms will not come through. These reforms have to come from within the organizations and professions. And two major reforms are already happening despite a lot of resistance. And I say these are structural changes that have to happen if the economy was to grow. One is happening, Higher Education Commission, which has come, and the law will be in place. And second, replacing the Medical Council of India, the National Medical Commission. Now, these were also very, very much needed reforms that have happened now. Similar reforms are needed for the other four services that I just mentioned. Coming to second issue, which was mentioned here, related to data. I am so happy that what we have been talking for now years, there is somebody from the stage mentioned about it. Now, globally, services have been very clearly and soundly classified. Now you have CPC code classification, CPC 2.1, which very clearly defines various services and their scopes. But in India, we have not been following. We have not graduated from 1.1, and also even in the GST, the harmonization of those codes which are globally followed doesn't exist. So now we are driving, I would suggest SEPC DG. I have personally invited the DGCIS, which is Director General of Commercial Intelligence and Statistics, a Government of India Ministry of Commerce organization. Her name is Krishnamurthy. She is here and with her team to essentially work on statistics on services, because statistics services are pathetic. They just don't exist. So what you said, if we were to follow, then very poorly collated data is actually available. And very little data on the bilateral export-import basis is available, and the only source today is the Reserve Bank of India. And Reserve Bank of India data, it doesn't, we have now gone into details, and we have requested them to include purpose code as one of the criteria in the data that is collected when any supplier of the services fills up the form to receive the remittance of the money that he will get in lieu of the services that he is going to render. And that is getting, last week only I had meeting with the CBIC member, a very detailed meeting. My joint secretary who is here, Mr. Darpan Jain, he is aware, and we are going to push for institutional, because now with the GST coming in, it is possible to collect all data. We have suggested 2 more fields to be added for the services purposes, and sharing of that data on anonymized basis, which means we don't need the name of the person or the company, but we simply need the nature and scope of the services and the services rendered. So this work is going on, but I would request that industry sets up a kind of group of knowledgeable people, because many even in the service industry don't know what the CPC code is, how the services are classified, how they are measured. It's just not known to them. So if the knowledgeable people come in contact with the SEPC, we can set up a task force with the DGCIS and actually work very seriously. At one stage we were thinking of actually bringing a legislation, because some countries have legislation for collection of data on services, because then under that law, onus of providing that basic statistics is put on the company. That under the law, you will supply this, file this return on quarterly or 6 monthly or annual basis, and data regularly flows to. But then government felt after interacting with the industry that that might be a little harsh on the industry, and we didn't want to disrupt the growth of the industry, and we wanted let it come voluntarily and let there be a system which can perhaps do a better job than making it mandatory. Mandatory could be a stage when everyone is prepared and systems have come in place, only few are violating that process, only then the mandatory law can be put. So second, my request would be after reform that on statistics part, let there be a group from the industry, and we would be very, very happy to collaborate and put a team in place to work on this on time-bound basis. Third area, we also provide services, incentive to services that are provided online, which means mode 1 of export. So whether it is the medical transcript, or it is the architectural designs, or it is the accountancy services, or any other professional services. And again, UNCTAD has done, and this is again for the industry to actually work out. Last year they released a report where for the first time, because everything was getting classified as IT services. They are not IT services. The IT is merely a carrier. The services content there is either engineering or the architectural or legal or financial, and therefore what UNCTAD has done, they have identified 11 services where content and carrier has been separated. And they have said the definition of the service would be based on the content and not the carrier. So carrier is the IT platform. That doesn't mean that everything is IT. Everything is not IT. Now, This also industry is not doing. As a result of which, what is happening, that the incentive that we offer cannot be availed by the industry, because the DGFT and the revenue department, they say that this is IT service and IT is not qualified to get the incentive. And industry is not maintaining data, is not providing logic, is not giving classification, as a result of which this also is being missed. And this is third point where I would like to request and urge industry that you have to put your house in order to ensure that these things are. Fourth point, which is very important point, is about the project exports. Now, engineering, consultancy, and as I said, project export is a separate subject by itself, and a very, very important subject. Today on the industry side, for the project exports, a very clear policy interventions that are required, that are not being suggested. In piecemeal, problems are posed and those problems are addressed. But project export as a subject is not attended to on holistic basis by the industry, and government interaction has to happen, that what is the ecosystem which is required to promote project export out of India as a complete package, not in piecemeal. Today somebody is supplying components, somebody is supplying material, somebody is providing, and everyone is dealing and nobody is dealing project as a whole. Lastly, fifth point that I feel is equally important, that our processes have to change. Say for example, we have been talking of so many construction projects are in courts. They lead to time, cost overruns, delays, so much of capital is blocked and projects are incomplete. Why? Because we have not gone for institutional arbitration. We are still following the ad hoc arbitration. For construction projects and for any commercial project, courts are not the right way to go about. Word over, it is established that you have to follow commercial arbitration, and also commercial arbitration which is not ad hoc, because ad hoc arbitration has lower credibility and then finally it gets challenged in the court, then the purpose of the whole arbitration goes away. If you have institutional arbitration, the chances of that going to court is minimal, because that is the final settlement that the country would encourage and accept. So this is my fifth point, that as an industry, the engineering projects in particular, they have to go whole hog for the institutional arbitration, which government is supporting. Government came out with the new law in 2016, and they have brought out two major amendments which actually support institutional arbitration. So with these words, I am very happy to be here, and I am very happy to interact, and I am leaving a lot of work for you to do, because we are prepared to do all this, but we feel that from the industry side, a lot more needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey, and thank you for your views. And we will certainly, we are working with SEPC and will continue to work with SEPC very actively. And in view of, we've already exceeded the time, and I'm sure everybody here would want to respond and would want to discuss more. I would suggest the DG of SEPC that we should, this 1 hour session for this subject is not sufficient, and we should actually plan for a larger full day session in which some of the issues that Mr. Pandey brought about, and the issues that Alok, Ganesh and Samuel and Mr. Ghoshal and have brought about needs to be discussed, and we have to take it to a conclusion, and we are definitely willing to work with the government to ensure that our aspiration of achieving a $5 trillion economy, whatever services can contribute, we'll definitely be able to do that. And thank you all for participating in this session. And I would like to thank all the panelists also for the wonderful contributions that they have made.
Thank you. Just I forgot to mention, under the Champion Services Initiative with the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry, we have launched a new program which the ministry has now be carrying out, Nirman Kaushal Vikas Yojana. So the focus of this program is that the best international skilling practices that you need in the construction sector, they need to be supported. Because today there is very little investment and your people cannot go out to work because suddenly they feel that what they have been used to using at home is not there. It's a completely different technology, and here that capital investment is not there to train them. So this initiative is basically to create that investment here so that people are trained on the best and the latest in the world.
Thank you, sirs. That was a very intellectual discussion and has given us an insight towards the roadmap for positive progress. I now request Dr. Rajashekhar and Additional Secretary Sudhanshu Pandey, Ministry of Commerce and Industries, to release the sectorial overview for our dignitaries and distinguished foreign buyers.
So we have come out with a sectoral overview so that the next full day session that we have has a good background, and we will include today's discussion in it and then take it further ahead.
I now call upon Director General SEPC, Mrs. Sangeeta Godbore, to give a small token of appreciation to all the speakers.
In typical Kannada style, some flowers from.
Very nice.
So this is sustainable and local. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. I now declare the session complete.